Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'll be talking about urban environments. So this unit is, I think, option D of geography, IBDP. So I'll start with defining urban areas. So an urban area is a human settlement with high population density and infrastructure of the built environment. So urban areas are created through urbanization and are categorized by urban morphology as cities, towns, conurbations, or suburbs. Okay. And the creation of early predecessors of urban areas during the urban revolution led to the creation of human civilization and modern urban planning, which, along with other human activities such as exploitation of natural resources, leads to human impact on the environment. So these are key definitions and keywords that you should know for this unit. So the first word is range. So this means an area served by a settlement, which can also be called a hinterland. So the second word is threshold, which means the absolute minimum number of people required to support a service and keep it in business. And thirdly, this is sphere of influence. You also use this word in leisure, sport, and tourism, but also applies to this unit as well. So this means the maximum distance that customers are prepared to travel to access a good or service. And the fourth word I have here is low-order goods. So this can be like convenience store goods, convenience goods bought on a necessity basis, and includes items like bread, milk, or rice. And then we have high-order goods, which are more luxurious and are purchased on an infrequent basis and generally more costly, such as tablets, devices, designer items, and cars. Okay, now let's talk about the characteristics of urban settlements. So a settlement is defined as a place where people live. Settlements are grouped according to their specific characteristics, depending on their population size, function, features, and hierarchy on the urban pyramid. So the focus of this topic is on urban settlements itself. So let's start with the first one. The characteristics can be classified as the site, so the actual ground on which a settlement is located. It is also known as the absolute location of a place, usually indicated by the longitude and latitude of the given settlement. Okay, and the second characteristic is the land use and function. So the function of a settlement refers to the main activities taking place there. So this is related to the land use because the function will determine how the land in the settlement will be used for. So examples could be the commercial function, like supermarkets and farmers markets, religious functions like church, mosques, shrines, temples, and synagogues, and transportation functions. So this could be like the main roads, the highways, the airports, seaports. And we have the agricultural function, which is like farming activities, and educational functions, which is like schools and universities. So land use can also fall under categories which are different from functions. So this would be the residential function. So this is for housing where people live. Industrial function. So this is for industries and factories. Recreational function. So this is for like sporting facilities, anything related to having fun, leisure, and tourism. And the fourth function right here, I'm going to highlight it, is transportation function. So this can be roads and railway network. So basically like monorails and MTRs. So urban land use, however, does change over time. So depending on the level of economic development and availability of the factors that once determined the particular functions of the settlement really changes. Okay, now let's look at the third characteristic, which is hierarchy. So a hierarchy of a settlement refers to the arrangement of a settlement in terms of its importance or significance. So this is basically like class. The higher it is on the pyramid, the more important it is. The lower it is, the less important it is. So it depends on a range of factors. You know, as I mentioned before, range, the maximum distance people are prepared to travel for this item. Threshold, the minimum number of people required to sustain a business. Sphere of influence, how much influence it has to drag people in. High order goods and low order goods. This kind of determines in what like place they have in the hierarchy. So the functions of a settlement may be determined by the concepts above, hence its location and place on the settlement hierarchy. Low order goods are sold in low order settlements and high order ones in the latter. So, however, high order goods are sold in high order settlements only, as I said before. In other words, again, high order settlements provide high and low order functions, but this is not true for low order settlements. So, for example, let's take a look at like New York. That is a really, really urban area and has low order goods and high order goods. So low order goods could be like the Whole Foods market there, the grocery stores they have there. But the high order goods can be the designer brands they have there, the very elite technology shops there. But if you go to a rural area, let's say, there would be little to no high order services, but a lot of low order goods, since there is still a population they have to sustain. Okay, now let's look at this pyramid right here, which kind of shows you the different settlement types. So we first have a hamlet, which is not so common now. It was really common like years before, not now. That's like populations around 10 to 100. And then we start to go up village, small town, large town, regional center, and capital city. So it's a really nice summary of the settlement hierarchy right here. And one thing that's missing here that's really tip top of the pyramid is megacities. So megacities are cities that have a population of over 10 million. So Tokyo is a megacity, and I believe Shanghai is also a megacity. So the rapid urbanization has resulted in the rapid development of megacities. In 1950, less than 30% of the world's population lived in cities, but now more than half live in cities. So, in 2008, this is really old data, but still really valid, the UN claimed that 74% of the world's population lived in towns and cities in MEDC, so middle-income countries, and 45% in LEDCs. In 1900s, the only megacities in the world were London and Paris, and today the number of megacities have increased. And again, with Tokyo, I have statistics now, 35 million people as of 2000. Okay, so if we look now, like more towards the time now, so 2017, other megacities like Mumbai, Mexico City, Sao Paulo, New York, Jakarta, Delhi, and Lagos, they have been becoming megacities as well. This could be like a boom in their population because their fertility rates are high, or it could be like an influx of migrants and immigrants going into their country for job opportunities. It could be a myriad of reasons, but those are just some I could list. So, there are general trends in the growth of megacities. So the largest cities are in Southeast Asia and Latin America. And the fastest growing cities are in Southeast Asia, mostly due to migration as well. And the rate of growth of cities in MEDC slowed in the second half of the 20th century, but picked up again due to migration. So this unit really has a lot of joint links with the population unit, which would be also good to review together. So in China, most large cities are along the coastal areas, which you can also observe in the population unit. It's because there's more accessible services there. So as you can see from the map I put here, you can see the 20 most populous megacities. So as you can see, there is a concentration in Asia, as well as a small concentration here in Latin America. Okay, so now let's talk about the reasons for such rapid increase in the number of megacities. So economic growth, that is a given, as a result of industrialization leading to an increase in demand for labor in mines and manufacturing sectors. Natural increase due to the youthful nature of urban population resulting in high birth rates, as I said before, and again, rural-urban migration. Okay, number 4, a characteristic of an urban settlement is the growth process, whether it's planned or spontaneous. So the growth process of urban settlements refers the various ways these settlements may change in the hierarchy from one stage to the next. So essentially it talks about how they evolve over time. Either it's planned or spontaneous. Most of the time in LICs it's quite spontaneous because of the influx of migrants and their fertility rates. Okay, now let's look at the factors affecting the pattern of urban economic activities. So first we have land values. So land values as a factor affecting the pattern of urban economic activities may be best understood when examined using the bid rent theory. So I have it down here. The theory shows how the price and demand for land changes as the distance from the CBD, so central business district, increases. Its basic assumptions are that the highest bidder gets the land and is expected to obtain maximum profit from the land. This is based on the idea that because businesses wish to maximize profitability, they are willing to pay more money for land close to the CBD and less for the land further away. So if you look at this diagram right here, you could see how shops and offices are closer to the CBD, but their rents, like the bid rent theory, it's higher. The price of land is higher. But when we look at residential areas, they're more far away. They have a distance from the CBD, but in return, their price of land is lower. Okay, now what are some limitations to this model? It is really helpful to understand how the sphere works, but it always has a limitation. It classifies low-class areas, and we can find some of the most expensive properties due to urban regeneration and gentrification or cultural variation. And there's urban renewal as well, so wealthy people are replacing buildings. Okay, now let's look at the peak land value intersection. So this is on the basis of the bid rent theory, so the more accessible the site, the higher its land value. So rents will therefore be highest along main routes out of the city center and outer ring roads. Where two of these roads intersect, a secondary PLVI develops as shown in the diagram below. Okay, so imagine you're in a really populous city. So let's take New York as an example again. You wouldn't see a single house there. You would only see a bunch of apartment complexes because the land value of that area is way too high for a person to purchase a single house. Not saying that they can't, but it's really rare to see one. Same thing applies to most megacities. When you see a district that is really, really busy, it is really hard to catch a single home. It's usually like mansions, malls, and other services that are high order. Okay. And a CBD, again, Central Business District, is the center of all economic activities in the urban area. Most cities in the world have their CBDs located either in the center of the city or close to a major seaport, so that's Shanghai, such as in New York as well, and Accra, where the CBD is close to the sea. London and Tokyo have their CBD in the center of the city. So some CBDs are located on mountaintops, which face a lot of problems with expansion and always has to come down to the valley. This is why Ghana's capital city moved from the undulating land of Cape Coast to the flat land of Accra. So in the CBD, the principal commercial streets and main buildings are mostly located there. They moved their CBD. So there's always characteristics to things. So yes, I do have characteristics of the CBD. So first thing is they have multi-story development. As I said before, you would only see tall buildings. You wouldn't see single 1 to 2 floor houses. You would see a bunch of buildings with over 20 floors. You would see a concentration of retailing, a lot of shops there, high order goods. You would also see a concentration of public transport, whether it's buses, trains, and trams. And we have vertical zoning is apparent. How the city is separated from its services, how it's separated from the residential areas are very apparent if you see the map from a spherical view. And number 5, high daytime population and low night population. 6, functional segregation. So every part of the city has a different use. We have a CBD, we have a residential area, and we have leisure facilities, sporting facilities. It is organized in a way which, it's functional. It changes with time. These CBDs have they have an opportunity to expand. They have so much potential since people keep moving there. That's why, it is apparent, it is obvious that it will change over time. Number 8, traffic restrictions are great and there's a lot of congestion in the streets. The more populated an area is, the more congestion you would face. So number 9, economic and tertiary activities. So like shops, offices, entertainment, all found there. So these are some factors that causes a CBD to decline, the central business district to decline. Yes, they can decline due to the fact of deindustrialization or urban decay, when a city becomes less famous because it's not that loved anymore, or people move away to a bigger city. So, number one, poor and aging nature of infrastructure. That is one major thing. And number two is the increase in private car ownership, which makes people easier for people to live outside the CBD. So CBD is really expensive, right? To buy houses there, it's really expensive. So people would just move to residential areas that are kind of off the coast of a CBD. And since they have cars, they can just move there. They could drive to the CBD. So that doesn't make it a problem. And number three, investors attracted to out-of-town locations because many business owners desire to escape the traffic congestion and pollution. Even though this is such a specific problem, it is prevalent. Escaping the traffic congestion and pollution is a great factor, and it will save you a lot of time. So these businesses are attracted to that. And number four is the cost of development and maintaining the CBD. The CBD has an influx of people. So to not maintain it is not a given. You have to maintain it for people to live there. It's supposed to be habitable. But it gets expensive to maintain the infrastructure or improve the conditions in the CBD due to, again, traffic, harboring movements, or the high cost involved in replacing or renewing the existing infrastructure. Congestion, again. And number six, poor planning by city authorities. So sanitation, for example, can lead to CBD decline when poorly planned by creating massive pollution. Okay. And industries are attracted to these CBDs in large cities because this is a given, this is really obvious. Cities have large markets which attract large numbers of consumers, and cities have highly skilled labor that are innovative, so creative, and can provide information for research and development of the products and produced. And there's economies of scale. This is an economic term, but it's still good to know that, if you live in a place where there's a lot of prosperity, it'll come to you very quickly. And urban planning. So in most cities in the world, like Tema, Brasilia, Canberra, Gonju-Yonggi, and Putrajaya, are planned according to the location of economic activities. So in Tema, the industries are located in the eastern part of the city, while the residential areas are located in the west of the city in order to reduce pollution, because the wind blows from southwest to northwest. This is really key as it, eliminates all that negative externality. And again, in Tema, the industrial area is located along the coast where the major port is situated. So this also facilitates the importation of raw materials and export of manufactured goods into the country. And in other CBDs, such as, Beijing, during the 2008 Olympic Games, polluting industries are relocated away from the city in order to reduce the level of smog and environmental pollution in 1992. And during the Barcelona Games, it's quite interesting. Barcelona's waterfront industries were used as a location for the Olympic stadiums as a way of regenerating economic activities in that part of the city. And again, during the London 2012 Olympic Games, Stratford Park and Lower Lee Valley, they were revived. The area was dilapidated, and the government decided to locate the stadium as a way of revitalizing and regenerating that part of the city in order to enhance its economic prospects and opportunities for the coming future. Okay. Now let's look at the factors affecting the pattern of residential areas within urban areas. So a number of factors are responsible for the location of residential areas in cities. So the first one is it's a physical factor. So in most cities, wealthier people stay away from the CBD or the city center, while low-income earners live close to CBD, especially in LEDCs. So in some LEDCs, however, wealthier people live close to CBD, while poorer people live in the outskirts of the city. In most advanced countries, wealthy people live outside of the city in order to escape the city noise, industrial noise, and vehicles, And the wealthy people live outside of the CBD to escape traffic and high land values and benefit from cheaper transportation networks. since, they can afford to buy their own cars. And in some residential areas are located on major roads and water bodies, such as rivers, to make transportation easier, while others are also located to airports. So these are physical factors that actually affect the pattern of where people live. And another one, again, is land values. It's always about money. If it's more expensive, people won't buy the area. It's really expensive. But, high income earners might be more adept to purchasing an area with high land values. But, people that are like, they don't have money, they won't purchase anything with high land values. Another thing that is important is ethnicity. So ethnicity is also important in determining the residential patterns in a city. So, for example, let's think of San Francisco, New York, London, and Paris, Japan. They all have Chinatowns. Chinatowns where Chinese immigrants stay together in order to maintain their culture is really prevalent. You can see it in almost every single country. Locating residential areas according to ethnic lines has benefits, positive segregation, and disadvantages, negative segregation. So positive segregation includes the benefits that are accrued by the people living there, such as culture, food, and etc. Negative segregation is when the indigenous people look down upon them. Location of residential along ethnic lines may also come about due to government policies to segregate different ethnic groups. You could also categorize this idea as ethnic enclaves, where there is a concentration of people from a specific ethnicity. Okay, so now, and there's also urban residential planning, which is also an important aspect. So depending on how the, government, engineers, architects, and construction workers design the city, it always affects the residential areas. And another important social factor is urban poverty and deprivation and informal economic activity in urban areas. So the concept of poverty and deprivation relates to the problems facing inner cities in urban areas. So it involves a continuous process of poverty being transmitted from one generation to another. So this is what we call a cycle. And the factors that makes it difficult to escape such poverty is shown down below. You can see that it's a cycle. It goes on forever. Someone needs to break it, but it's usually hard. Okay, now let's look at deprivation in general, social deprivation. So this is when a person or a community lacks what they need to have a decent life. So this includes money, work, housing, and services. Social deprivation can be measured using indicators such as life expectancy, level of education, so literacy rates, and income, and informal activity. So informal economic activity is work that is done outside of the formal and regulated framework. So the following list includes common features of informal activity, economic activity, which is like markets outside. Like if you've seen those farmers markets in Southeast Asia, some of these markets are what you call an informal economic activity area, where basically when you buy their items, there's no tax, right? That tax is supposed to go to the government, but no, they're keeping it. So this is informal economic activity. This doesn't contribute to the GDP. It just goes into their pockets. Another one I have is urban stress. So this is a state of bodily or mental tension developed through city living or the physical, chemical, or emotional factors that give rise to that tension. So this really relates to how you feel about living in a place. So urban stress can be due to noise, like all those cars beeping all the time. You could feel really stressed from that, and that is categorized as urban stress. And another one I have here is informal settlements. So this is informal housing or informal settlement can include any form of housing, shelter, or settlement, which is illegal, falls outside of the government control or regulation, or is not afforded protection by the state. So informal settlements, essentially, they're slums, they're squatter homes. And they're illegal because they're not paying to live there. So they get like an empty piece of land they found and they start building houses out of really flimsy material. And yeah, that's why it's a problem. It's called informal because it's not actually contributing anything to the economy, such as informal activity as well. So indicators of deprivation, again, economic, so access to employment, levels of family income, Social indicators, so crime, levels of health, access to healthcare, and proportion of lone parent families. So what I mean by lone parent families is like a single parent household. And physical indicators, so quality of housing, level of pollution, environmental indicators, so again, noise pollution, and how derelict the land is. So what I mean by derelict is how worn down the land is. And political indicators, the opportunity to vote, opportunity to participate in community organization. Okay. Now, so lastly, let's look at just slums in general. These are things that are apparent in urban areas, not as much in HICs, mostly in MICs and LICs. So slums and squatter settlements, well, the UN defines it as a contiguous settlement where the inhabitants are characterized as having inadequate housing and basic services. And a squatter is a person who settles on new, especially public land, without title, or a person who takes unauthorized possession of unoccupied premises. So not to categorize people, but that would be like homeless people living in the park. So in 2001, the number of slum dwellers worldwide was 924 million. And most of them were, that's 32% of the world population and 78.2% of the urban population in LEDCs, so less economically developed countries. So again, let's look at the characteristics of slums and squatter settlements. So they're easy to locate because they're so apparent, because they're usually on steep slopes, they're floodplains, edge of the town locations, or areas close to industrial complexes. So first, they have a lack of basic services such as sanitation facilities and safe water resources. And they have a substandard housing or illegal and inadequate building structure. So their houses can actually be made out of really thin pieces of metal that you'd see on cargo ships, or they could be made out of wooden scraps or plastic bags. So third one is overcrowding and high density. So it's really, really concentrated there. There's probably 5 people living in one house. So when a natural disaster hits there are a lot of casualties. Unhealthy living conditions and hazardous location. Since they try to find an unoccupied land, that wouldn't be a land that is desirable to people. So they would usually go and find an area that's not desirable to industries, people, residential architects, and the government. They would live there. That's why it's really hazardous. Insecure tenure, irregular or informal settlement, lack of security, poverty, and social exclusion. Okay. So there's a slum in Rio de Janeiro, and they face many, many problems such as unemployment. There's housing stress as well, and there's overcrowding. And overcrowding really, really is a factor that exacerbates the potential to catching diseases and getting a little mini pandemic in the neighborhood. And they have rising crime rates as well because people are able to steal things from each other in such a concentrated area. And since it's so highly concentrated, there's, of course, a concentration of poverty and social and economic deprivation. But you have to realize that slums are actually useful for people because they serve as a first stop point for immigrants who do not have money to rent decent accommodation. They serve as a place for residents, for low-income earners. They are a base upon which informal entrepreneurs are able to operate. So yes, you have to think about that. But there's still disadvantages to slum dwellings, like pollution and insecurity of land tenure and poor quality housing, unreliability of basic services like water and electricity. And let's look at the informal economic activities. So the informal sector, which is usually you can associate it with informal settlements, is employment is paid work on a casual basis, so informal sector employment. Jobs are irregular in the informal sector, and workers are often self-employed without earning pensions and without paying taxes. That's why they don't get pensions. This sort of employment is common in urban areas of developing countries, for example, in Mexico, like Mexico City. So it may involve service jobs such as like cleaning shoes, selling bottled water on the street, selling fruits, and small scale businesses like craft industries. So the informal employment, also includes illegal activities such as theft, prostitution, and selling drugs. The sector constitutes about 60% of the employment sector, which is really unfortunate because they're not getting the social security safety net that they need, and they're not getting, aid, because if you're paying your taxes, you can actually get aid, and you could file for bankruptcy and get your loans and whatnot. And yeah, they lack that. So, and the final points here are, to sum up the informal activities, is they are self-employed, may involve family members, less capital is required to start. So for example, when you're starting a business in a city, you need a lot of money to get it going. You have to create your products, you have to sell them, you got to market them. But here in informal economies, if you're selling like bottled water, less capital is required to start. So it is usually labor intensive. So meaning that, you really have to use physical work. And the low quality standard goods are produced as well. And there's no government assistance in form of loans and technical know-how workbooks, and they are most illegal. In that business is not usually registered, taxes are not paid. It's not going into the government's tax revenues, and it's not going into the GDP of that country. And irregular working hours, business hours, can vary depending on the mood, schedule, or factors that may affect the owner. Okay, that was a really long video on urban environments and its characteristics of what they have and how they are categorized and classified. Thank you for watching.